Hey guys, Pete here. Been kind of a crazy morning, but we're here. We're going to be talking about Severance Season 2, Episode 5 today. The Trojan's Horse. And we got a couple of guests, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get a little bit of, check in. You guys know Jim, so we'll start with you. You haven't been here since what, episode 2?
That sounds right, because we skipped a week and then Aaron was on.
Yeah. So what's been going on with you since then, and Bald Move, your podcast?
Well, we picked up the new seasons of Yellow Jackets, so that's been interesting. It's another one of those sort of mystery shows, little less sci-fi, maybe a little more supernatural, but really enjoy that show. It's just silly fun. I'm not taking it too seriously, but that's kind of the new thing over at Bald Move.
Yeah, I did that last season, and I decided not to because it's coming out at the exact same time as Severance, and that's particularly hard for me. But I'm just going to be watching it for fun this time.
That's probably the way to do it. Yeah.
So, like I said, I think it was episode 2 you were last on. Some of the stuff we talked about then seemed like it came back up this week, so that's kind of fun. And so we got a special guest today. We have Quinn from Quinn's Ideas, great sci-fi, mostly books channel on YouTube. I came across your stuff way back whenever, during Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fires. Yeah. So since it's your first time here, why don't you introduce yourself and let everyone know what you're at. And then I guess what we'll do is we'll talk about this episode, like general thoughts on this episode and the season so far. So you can just pick up with that, and we'll have Jim follow you on that one.
All right. Okay. So I am Quinn from Quinn's Ideas. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about science fiction books. I'm kind of known for like Frank Herbert's Dune, Three Body Problem, a bunch of other stuff. Just whatever I'm reading at the time that I think is interesting, I tend to cover it. And I've really just been watching Severance for fun. I have not been like watching it or like analyzing it as like a content creator really at all since season 1. I just thought it was a really good show. But like randomly before the season, Apple TV just sent me like some balloons and like some early episodes. So I posted about it. But I haven't felt compelled to just make any episodes about each individual episode. But maybe I will at the end of the season once I can see the full picture. Because I think this is really the type of show that you need to see the big picture before you like jump to any conclusions, because they're always kind of throwing you for loops. But yeah, I've been really enjoying the season. It is moving a little bit slow, but I am appreciating like the expansion of the world and like seeing things develop. It's been really interesting, and I think they're delving more into like the philosophical question of what it means to even be a person. We see a little bit of that in this episode. So I'm definitely liking it. I think it's one of the best science fiction shows on television, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where we go from here.
Yeah, that's something I want to come back to in a bit, because we were sort of I guess we don't need to explain everything that happened backstage here before, but there was a little bit of an issue, and so we didn't get to talk a whole lot before we got started. And that's one of the things that we mentioned, though, is just I mean, like I sci-fi is always the draw to me is that it is in my imagination, right? Like TV shows, like there's some that are good, but like it's really hard to recapture that, you know what I mean? Because like it's all speculative. So you fill in the details in your own mind with your own imagination, and that's really the draw. And that's like, if you can pull that off on TV, then that's amazing. But it's not something that's been done that many times. I mean, there's good shows with sci-fi aspects, but just something that could live up to the to the experience of reading a good book. I don't know that we've really gotten there yet. So Jim, your thoughts on episode 5 and the season so far?
I'll say I was a little surprised to hear you say, Quinn, that it's feeling slow, because I feel like maybe it's just the pace of the show and I'm used to it now, but I feel like they're doing a pretty good job keeping me engaged. And maybe that's it. Like, it is moving a little slowly, but every time I have a question, it feels like they've anticipated it, and they're either giving me answers quickly, or they're like totally going the other way and saying, we know you want these answers, we've got something else for you that we think you're also going to like. And so far they've been right every time. So I'm really enjoying this season so far. Probably as much as season 1, which is saying something, because I was shocked at how good this show was in season 1. It just caught me in the first episode and did not let go.
Yeah, and I think that, that was the case in season 1 too. I don't think that's a departure necessarily. You know what I mean? It was certainly a bit of a slow burn as they introduced the world in the first season. I think,
yeah,
so I guess I anticipated that going in, but if they, I agree with what you're saying, and you were saying that in your podcast as well about the way they're in, if it's going to be a mystery box, which, is kind of like tricky and just in general, and because so many times people get super into it and then they lose interest by the end. That's what I want to see a show do, is I want them to be like, okay, so you're going to be thinking about this, you're going to be talking about this, so here's at least something for you. You know what I mean? To keep you engaged. And the show does seem to do that pretty well.
Yeah, my reference points for like slowness of pacing, I think, is Lost. And then my reference for just full on gas with pacing, I think, is Breaking Bad. So this hits somewhere in the middle. I agree with that.
I was going to say that I don't even necessarily mean slow as like a bad thing. Like, I like slow burns. Like, I love Stanley Kubrick, and like his work tends to be slow, but I love it still. And I think Severance is generally just like a slower paced show for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think about stuff.
Yeah. And so I guess let's talk about Cold Harbor, right? Because that was sort of the big, everything's kind of getting more and more like this is the only thing that really matters to a lot of people involved in this story, right? And we're talking about pacing. So like it was at 85% the last time we saw it at the end of the episode before he has his little flash of reintegration and then walks out. So I guess like I wanted to talk about the process of that, like his reintegration, because that seems to be the big thing that's going to happen towards, by the end of the season. I think we all could probably agree that we expect him to be fully integrated or on the brink of being fully integrated by the final episode of this season. And, so we know there's 85%. I think he started, it was 81%. So you think like maybe on a day's work, he does a few percent, like, 5% or so. So we are seeing that there's not a lot of time, like calendar time left until he gets to the end of that. And I wanted to talk about the reintegration process, but then I also wanted to talk about it kind of like on the bigger picture sci-fi thing, Quinn, and let you have a chance to sort of talk about where you see how this fits into the larger, lexicon of sci-fi.
Oh, okay. Well, when I first started watching this show, I was talking to some people and they were like questioning whether or not the show was even science fiction. And I was like wondering, why do you think this isn't science fiction? Because a lot of people, when they think science fiction, they think aliens or spaceship or like this like obvious technology. But really the only thing that's required for science fiction is what you would call a novum, which is like the thing in that fictional world that separates it from like the world that you live in. So the novum in Severance is like whatever technology that they have that allows them to sever people and split the innie from the outie. So that alone like fits within like the larger lexicon of science fiction, where we're concerned with like there's this sense in science fiction that like altering the brain in any way like will lead to like devastating consequences, altering your reality and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't really have like, You mentioned the story. You mentioned one of the Philip K. Dick stories called Payday, which I've never read.
Paycheck. Yeah,
Paycheck.
Paycheck. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so yeah, well, that was one of the things. Like, I think that's I would say that was I'd say Philip K. Dick was the person that really solidified. Like, I think my entry point to sci-fi when I was younger was Kurt Vonnegut. Like, that was the guy who, when I read, his books, that's where I was like, oh, okay, so this is a little bit different than what I'd read before that, and it really put me in that direction. And then when I read Philip K. Dick, I was like, wow, this guy has got a crazy imagination, right? So he had this story called Paycheck, and it's basically like the non-disclosure agreement for this company that this guy gets a contract for is essentially like, we're going to wipe your brain after you work for us for 2 years. And then, it's like you said, it's the sci-fi of this is this piece of technology they have, right? This Severance chip. It's enough that it changes the whole world that they inhabit. And so that way you can do all sorts of things with these characters that you can't do with a unsevered character. And then we can look at all these different things through a different lens, and kind of with sci-fi, there's always that one step of separation, right? Where you can see a thing that you might not be able to see in yourself because you're imagining this whole different scenario and how that would play out. And like sometimes when you're just thinking about like regular stuff and regular life, you don't, that filter is that you just apply to it just kind of takes away your ability to see it as it actually is.
I will say that Severance is also carrying on an ancient tradition of science fiction that comes back from the origins of early science fiction, which is like this dialectic between mysticism or like religion or like belief in like the divine and the techno-rational. So science fiction is always returning to this dialectic. I talk about this with Dune a lot. Dune is like seen as such a classic in science fiction, but it's so concerned with like the mystical and the sublime. And I think that Severance is doing that as well. And it's also doing a thing, a traditional science fiction thing where it's this demonization kind of, or like this at least reluctance of techne, which is the idea of like technology, right? So there's this kind of side eye to this is kind of like a rabbit hole, but in Plato's view, right? Plato had this idea of episteme, right? And episteme is philosophy and like knowledge, right? And then there's techne, which is like the technical, a skill. And he viewed, and it also is the artifice, like the creation, like a piece of art could be techne, right? But he viewed it as obscuring the truth because he had this idea of universal forms. And if you make a piece of technology or create a piece of art, you're further obscuring the real thing. So this gets its way into science fiction, and it's kind of like this idea that still appears, this like kind of demonization, or like this like, oh, something that is technological is not as good. So you see that in this show as well, because the innies are not human to like the humans. They're like, oh, you're less than me because you're the product of this technology. So that's an aspect that I also noticed.
Yeah, I really like the idea that it's not just about the tech; it's also about the system of the corporation. And like what I really liked about this episode was that we see that the family behind it is also a super cult. You know what I mean? Like they're making decisions based on the cult beliefs that they have. And that's something that we'll be getting into as we go through this. But yeah, there's a lot of intersection between those different things. They like the technology is the starting point, but then it all of this other stuff is affected in really interesting ways.
Yeah, and evil corporations are a thing that have been in plenty of science fiction. That goes back to Philip K. Dick too. It was always some evil corporation at the root of what was happening. And he also had this very cynical view of society and where society was heading, and society's like devaluation of the individual. So all of these themes, I think, show up in Severance as well.
So I guess if we're gonna, I do want to talk about this cold open we have, because talk about evil corporations. I put this interview spot that I had here from Ben Stiller at the bottom, where he's talking about, because there was a lot of references about the innies and personhood basically in this episode. We heard several people remind us that there are different views on whether if you split someone into two, if the other part of that person is also an individual. And this is something that we talked about last time you were here, Jim. I don't know if you remember, but I was thinking, it seemed like Milch was being kind of nice to the innies. You know what I mean? Like, and we were talking about, if you want a workforce that'll do what you want and not give you problems, then it's probably counterintuitive to do some of the stuff he was doing. And we kind of see that play out this week, that the kindness reforms weren't really effective. They kind of turned them into, they had this rebellion going on, instead of just being like, oh, thank you for being, kinder and nicer or whatever. So this cold open, all right, we see this guy, we've heard about him, from Felicia and when she was talking to Irv. And this was a big question going into this episode, was what is going to happen out of, that conversation they had, now that Irv isn't returning to the severed floor. We see her and we connect back to the idea that she was kind of terrified of this guy. Right. And, we see that in full action here. They do this gag where they don't show the face. I found that a little bit annoying at first, but then it goes on for long enough that I was just like, all right, that's funny now. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you're not going to show us, you're going to make a point of not showing his face. So it's that, I believe it's Robbie Benson that they credit the actor in the credits, which is kind of silly after you hide his face or whatever, but I don't know who, else it would be. And I guess, like, what was your take on seeing the way that they introduced this new character? And I don't know. You can go first, Jim, I guess, since
I don't know. I'm obviously, this person is working on the testing floor, right, where they sent Gemma. Yeah. He's coming up to get his supplies. I don't know why they don't have the supplies down there. I guess O&D is making these dental tools, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what the point of not showing his face is, because there were a lot of theories going around before we had like really looked the credits or anything. I was talking with my co-host Aaron, and he was thinking maybe it was Petey, because he's got roughly, could be the right age, the hair color, and thinking like, oh, maybe his death was faked. If it's Robbie Benson, then it's not Petey. So what is the point of hiding the face of a new character? It's not going to mean anything to us anyway. It feels like it's just a gag, but yeah, but that also feels clumsy for this show too.
Huh.
So I'm confused by this, honestly.
Yeah, I thought. Go ahead, Quinn.
I was just going to say, I don't really know what to make of it either. Is it confirmed that it's a new actor cast to play this role, or is that just like a theory?
That's a speculation based on the fact that the actor, Robbie Benson is in the credits, but he doesn't show up anywhere else in the in the episode.
I don't know. So maybe a reason could be because they've already shown this person before, and they're like gonna reveal like, oh, it's that person. I don't know. And about like the dental tools in the beginning, I don't know what was going on with that. That's so weird. All I can think is like this company has these weird cult-like rituals that are kind of beyond comprehension, and we don't really know what the bigger picture is yet. So it might all just look like nonsense until we can like see it all and be like, oh, this is what this meant, and this relates to this thing from like season 1, episode 3. Even I don't know. So it might be one of those things that makes more sense when we see the bigger picture.
Like the goats. Yeah, which seemed to make no sense right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I think that's building. I think they look at that as part of their charm. You know what I mean? Is to have some of these things that are absurd, like the goats. Like I think that the goats were just they were less essential or less crucial to the actual story whenever they were introduced, and more of like, well, that would be a crazy thing if they found some goats when they were walking around, you know what I mean? And then people went so crazy about it that they were like, okay, well, maybe we need to actually put something, connect something there to make that a little bit more crucial. It was funny because when I'm watching this, I also hear this song that he's whistling, and I know the tune, like, you know what I mean? Not because I ever owned a Gordon Lightfoot album or ever, consciously put the track on, but just because of growing up at the time I did, you can't help but be like somewhat familiar with it, I guess. So for like 2 days, I was like having this tune. I can't think of what it was, but eventually it came to me. And I don't know, like I read an article with Ben Stiller where he said he just likes the song, which is something that he said in the past about other song choices. There's the line in the song that the lake never gives up its dead. And then I thought, well, maybe that has something to do with Gemma, since we thought Gemma was dead and she's not, at least not functionally or whatever. So did you guys have any thoughts about the Edmund Fitzgerald song showing up here? Like, it's pretty conspicuous that he chooses to whistle this as he walks down the hall.
I did wonder about the song, but I didn't know what to make of it. No, I didn't really think about it after that. So I did wonder, like, what it did seem like, this is supposed to mean something.
Yeah, like
maybe I don't have the data, but yeah.
Is it connected to Irv? Like what I'm thinking about, because it's a I don't know if you saw this, but one of our listeners sent in a screenshot this week of kind of if you take America or North America and you rotate it a little bit, the Great Lakes kind of line up to look like the lakes that you see Keir flying over in that animation when he takes off on that cliff. And
I did not see that.
The lake that Irv is standing on in the cold open, pun intended, of last episode, it is that cliff. Like, that's where that TV is. And so I wonder if it just like roughly connects back to him, like the lake never giving up their dead. Irv starts on that lake. Irv is now dead. Maybe there's some thematic connection that they thought was nice there.
I mean, it could be. Like, the thing that I thought about it, because, I also was wondering who it was. And then I looked at the credits and I saw Robbie Benson. And for me, it was kind of funny because these are two things. Like, if you say the name Robbie Benson, I know the two words together, but like, I couldn't in my head, like, put that to anything. Like, it didn't connect anything. Like, I couldn't think, oh, well, I saw this movie when I was a kid that Robbie Benson was in, or something like that. It was just a name that was there, kind of like how this song is just a song that is there. You know what I mean? So has nothing to do with the story, but that's sort of where I was going with it. I guess the main thing about this is this guy is scary. The Elizabeth and Felicia are creeped out by him. We can't see his face. There might be something going on with his face that makes him scary, or it could just be that that's just the way that he is, right? And I guess that's the biggest question that it raises, because as in the same vein as we're going towards reintegration, we're also going towards figuring out what's going on the testing floor, which can't really be good. Like, there's not like it's not going to be a surprise, like, oh, well, they're doing something cool down there. Like, it's going to be like a horror story, right? Yeah. So what do we actually think they're doing down there?
I mean, it's connected to Cold Harbor, right? And all of the discussion you hear around Cold Harbor from people who are apparently in the know is that it's going to change the planet. Now, I don't know if that's crazy cult talk, or if that
well,
is.
I mean, it is that, but it might be something else too.
Fair. So what is like big enough for it to be something? I mean, it could literally just be the cult talk where like we will finally have, harness the power of the Tempers, and we will be able to change mankind to be more in the image of Kier. I imagine it's that, because these people are a little nutso like that.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's something bigger with this being a sci-fi show. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be cult talk. I mean, yeah, we don't know. Or it could be something that like fundamentally changes the way humans interact and work and live their lives. But how would they go about doing that? I don't know. I don't know. But it did seem like, based on the first season, and I don't know if this has been readdressed, you guys have probably been paying closer attention to me. There was that pregnant woman who was severed while she was pregnant. So maybe they're working on something. They're going to allow access for severed people in more situations. I don't know. It could be something that really, it's apparently something that really shakes things up. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you're saying there is interesting, because that's definitely one of their corporate goals, right? Is to have other applications, because that will grow their product base, right? Like if they can, sever military people so that they don't have to have PTSD when they get out of the army or whatever, you know what I mean? Like those are huge contracts to sell chips, right? If they could convince people that, yeah, like, having a baby is hard. If you want, we can put this chip in your head and you won't have to remember any of the pain that's involved with that. Those are like real world applications for this thing that so far is just sort of like an in-house novelty on some levels, right? Like that, of course they have a labor reason why they want to have that, because then they basically have slaves and they can have them do whatever they want. But, the goal of a corporation is to sell more products, right? Is to increase their share value for their shareholders. And yeah, so I think that's really interesting, because what this episode kind of made more clear to me, or just sort of, I guess, reassured like the idea that it was already in my head, was that you have the corporate goals, but then you also have the cult goals, and I think it's going to be easy. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how close those two things are to each other, and like how they benefit each other.
I will say, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think that the cult exists to sustain the corporation and to keep it going. So I think that whatever the cult wants is going to benefit the corporation, because that's ultimately what matters. It's this corporation that wields immense power and control around the entire world. So yeah, whatever, it's going to be something that benefits the corporation.
What if there's going to be a struggle there between the two entities? Because the people who are really devoted to the cult are really devoted to the cult. Like a Jamie Egan, right? Helena's dad. And then there's the corporate side of it, which is the actual real power side, like you're saying. I wonder if that's like a season 3 thing where there's some sort of internal struggle.
Well, that was a Cobell thing for sure, right? I mean, that was the vibe I got from her, was that she was more about the cult and less about the corporation. You know what I mean? She did what she had to do for her job while she was there. But then she was also doing all this other stuff on the side. And it to me, it always felt like she was more like she was more concerned with Kier's ideas and principles and however that applied to her own personal issues, because there was definitely a personal angle to it. But yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see something, something bigger develop in that. And speaking of Cobell, this is like, of course she wasn't there last week, but this is one that's in the actual real world, not in the Ortbo or whatever. And we don't see anything from her at all. It's kind of surprising, isn't it?
That we're taking a break from saying Miss Cobell.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything other than.
I think they're just holding out and she'll pop back up eventually. But I was also going to say, I think it's kind of arguable the degree to which Kier is separable from the corporation itself. it's kind of like trying to separate L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology. It's
Right.
like, are they
Mhm.
not one in the same? Like, to what degree are Keir's values tied to just sustaining the corporation? So yeah, that would be all that I would add to that.
Yeah, I don't think we quite know yet. I think we see a couple of cracks. Like, I'm getting weird vibes from Helena, for sure. Like, she's making sacrifices. Pete, you had something in your latest video about this, where she's making sacrifices that no one else is asked to make, but they're also treating her kind of with kid gloves because she doesn't get the monthly performance reviews, as best I can tell. She's not subjected to any of Milch's humiliation. So, like, but I also get the vibe that she is not 100% on board with her father's stuff. And I can't tell if that's it feels like she's not 100% on board with the cult. She's actually looking for something outside of the cult. Like, that's why she goes
in this episode.
Yeah. So
maybe
the cracks are there already.
Yeah, maybe it's like her father's approval, or I don't know. Yeah, but you're right. I don't think she seems as devoted to the cult, and you really see that in this episode when they basically have to convince her to go back in.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like she doesn't want to go back in, but they convince her to go back in. So yeah,
it's she's a really interesting character, because in the early in the season I thought, okay, well, they're setting her up to have a redemption, sort of, you know what I mean? Like, that she's going to learn from her innie and become a better outie, basically. I mean, to make it very simple. But then they'll like do like all kinds, like then they'll have her say that they're fucking animals whenever she's talking about the innies. So like anytime, whenever, like, I'm sitting there and I'm watching her and I'm thinking, man, I'm feeling really sympathetic towards her in this situation. Like, growing up in this cult sucked. And you know what I mean? Like, she's like wanting to talk to her father and she can't. Like, she's going through these other people, these random other like zealots, essentially, right? And then you're like, oh man, I really want to see her turn things around. But then, like, she'll like sleep with Mark, like totally trick him and like take her out, or Annie's place and do something like that. I mean, people could make the argument that is like, a very, like, she basically raped him in a way, you know what I mean? And so she's really interesting in that. I keep thinking they're going to try to set her up for change in the direction of like where we're going to, she's going to be on the good side of things, but then there's always it's like one step forward, then two steps back kind of thing.
What I love about this show is the duality of all of the individuals, including like the outies and the innies, even the people that are non-severed. Everybody is so complex. Like we were even seeing that a little bit with Milch, like how he did the kindness reforms, and now he's kind of going back on that. So there's so much duality to every single character. It's almost as if like Severance goes down like multiple sub levels, even. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like thematically speaking.
Yeah, and that's that's what you get. Like that's what you get with a good sci-fi premise, right? You can just introduce that and then just say, okay, like, of course there's two sides to every people, but let's make that literal, and then let's see how that develops, And I think what's fun too is that, like, we saw Helly's return here, and she's such a rebel, and so that has to be a part of Helena too, right? You know what I mean? Like, even if it's not a part that she ever has had nurtured, or she wants to, she lets come out or whatever, it's still a thing that exists in her. Like, if her innie is capable of it, then the outie is capable of it too. And then, that it'll make sense if we ever get to that point. We talked about her place, and I want to talk about Mr. Drummond, because he's really, like, I'm saying how Covell is gone, and that kind of leaves a void, and Drummond is doing a pretty good job of stepping in and filling that hole that's on that side of the story for me. What do you think he does, like, what his job is?
It's tough to tell. I mean, he's clearly some kind of liaison. I think maybe between Jamie and the rest of the corporation.
Because I mean,
he's the one
she's
who
the
would
future
choose to tell him.
CEO. That's
Yes.
known, right? And it seems like he has more pull than her with her father.
Yes. And it's not just like a personal assistant role. This is not like Natalie's role with the board where she's just kind of a mouthpiece. This feels like a back and forth a little bit because he's denying information to Jamie.
Well, that's the next thing I wanted to talk about was, what do you think about this idea that they're like, no, we thought we'd spare him the details on this one. Like, that seems kind of crazy in a cult structure, right?
That they're sparing him details. Like, I thought he was like the big boss guy. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. And
his daughter almost died. I mean, like, his daughter was literally being dunked in the you know what I mean? It's not like a random employee. It's his daughter, which I don't even know. Like, after this episode, I'm not even sure what that means. Like, the idea of him being her father. Like, it doesn't seem like a traditional family situation, you know?
Yeah. Well, like, what is more important? Is it like the continuum of the company over all else? I think so, probably.
And that's to who? Like, is this a scenario where, well, if we told Jamie that his daughter was almost murdered a second time, he might not let her go back in, but we want her back in because it suits the corporation's interest, and so we don't tell him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's this theory that talks about how like corporations can like reach a size that they become these kind of self-sustaining entities, and like no individual can really steer the direction or control it because it sustains itself. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, in practice, that's real too. You know what I mean? Like, you know, to say that, I mean, they commit crimes, you know, all the time. Like, there's all kinds of crimes that are involved, and it would, in many cases, the way that they're structured, it would be hard to put that on one individual inside the corporation, because like, if that person didn't do it, then somebody else would. Like, it would almost, it's almost like self-sustaining and self-fulfilling. You know, like, it has to do what it has to do, which is creepy and scary. Sure. As is the cult of Kier, when you think about it, right? And you know, this is something I've been talking about all season, because I really wasn't sure initially if they were as dedicated. Like, if the people at the top were as dedicated. I think that this pretty much makes that clear that they are. This is not something that they just tell their subordinates to do and don't do themselves. I mean, you saw when he mentioned the obligement session, whatever that is, you know, she was like, no, I'm cool. I don't need that. You know what I mean? Like, I won't be needing that. That's okay. So someone who's the future CEO is still subject to like having to deal with something like that is probably not pleasant.
Yeah, the obligement session definitely sounds like some kind of torture, and like considering like the break room, I'm not looking forward to like experiencing that. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, obligement, something that someone is compelled to do, right? Yeah,
that's actually a pretty good connection, because you know the break room is similar to like auditing or whatever, right? Like so I imagine that the obligement session is probably something similar. It's just a different name on the outside, maybe, you know. Because they sort of like, you know, monitoring your response, like your heart rate and everything else. It's like a lie detector kind of. So they just keep having you say something until you don't give like a reaction anymore, like basically break you, right? So I guess you haven't been here. I know, Jim, you were kind of in the it's Helena, not Helly camp. When you were watching this initially, Quinn, were you thinking that that was Helly or Helena?
Oh, I knew it was Helena.
Yeah, right.
I thought it was pretty clear that was Helly. Yeah, it wouldn't make even narrative sense for it to be Helly. So I just thought, it was Helena.
That's sort of where I was at too. I mean, I think a lot of the debate was around details, you know, instead of actual story, like the bigger picture of like, it doesn't make any sense for them to send her back there. But I mean, people made good arguments, and to their credit, the show tried to keep that a mystery as long as it could. I mean, that was definitely their intention. I thought whenever we actually saw her go down in the elevator this time and she was standing there and then just walking down the hall, like it was so obvious, like to see the difference, you know, which is, I mean, that's pretty cool that they can pull that off. You know, I don't think that's as easy as they made that look, that we could, you know, that we could be like, maybe that's her, maybe it's not. And then when we see it, we can be like, oh, of course not. Like we watched 9 episodes with this character last season. Of course we know that's her. You know, obviously it has a lot to do with the Britt Lauer's performance too.
Mm-hmm.
But she, like, I guess it's interesting because when she showed up last season, that kind of threw everything off. Now when she's showing up this season, when she's finally back, she sort of hits them at their lowest point. You know, MDR is like, I mean, MDR is like pretty, like everyone's just sort of like off on their own in their own heads with their own stuff, and everything that they built up last season is like, this is as low as they can get now in the aftermath of the Ortbo. So she comes back and like, I didn't think about this until after, like when I was editing my video, but her brain is still like just minutes after waking up on stage and making a plea for them and saying they torture us and everything else. Everybody else is a few days ahead, so they've completely moved on and could care less about what she saw when she was outside. Like she doesn't even get a chance to say it, you know? Like she woke up on the national stage and made a plea for their freedom, and like nobody could be bothered to even ask her how that went.
Yeah, all of a sudden she's getting drowned, and then she's here. It's just like,
she gets a few minutes of waking up after being almost drowned.
Crazy.
And now she's back in there, and Mark is being a dick and won't even like pay attention to her. It's like middle school, you know. He's like mad at his middle school girlfriend and doesn't know how to express himself.
Definitely felt bad for Helly. I was like, just talk to her. Just talk to her, please.
Yeah, somebody, come on, you know. And
the thing I love about it though is like, the feelings on both sides of this, I think, are right. Like everybody has the right to feel the way they're feeling in this moment. Helly is so confused. Like, I didn't do anything. It's not my fault. That's not me doing this stuff to you. But Mark had the stuff done to him. And so he feels the way he feels. And he doesn't know if he can trust this person standing in front of him, because who is it? I felt for both of them in the scene. I'm like, oh, it's so sad for both of these characters. Yeah, because of course he doesn't care. He can't trust the company, and she is the company. The person, not her, not the one that's there, but you know, the person that she spawned from, you know, through this technology or whatever you want to say. I agree 100%. Like he's being a dick, and it's frustrating for us as viewers to watch him do it, but it makes complete sense to him, and he hasn't even put it out there yet that he slept with her Audi. You know, that's a whole nother layer that hasn't even been exposed yet. Yeah, and she doesn't know that. Sorry,
I was going to say, ironically, it's difficult for him to like separate the two people, but yeah.
Yeah, it's mushy. Is that what he said a couple episodes ago?
Yeah,
it's mushy.
It truly is. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting, you know, because she kind of rallied everyone together. She kind of was the impetus for their big push to get outside last season, and now she's there, and she can't really. She's just as isolated as everyone else at this point. The cubicle also, like cutting that down to 3, that really was just a harsh visual to just make that all real on the screen.
It's already so like empty. So yeah. It just makes it feel more empty, and just like it's almost painfully bland. Everything about like these offices are just like painfully bland. And it's just like, it's like almost like another form of torture.
Yeah, and Jim, you and Aaron were talking about on your podcast that I was listening to earlier about just how it doesn't even functionally make sense. You know, like the the regular cubicle, like at least it made sense as far like it was a weird little island in a giant room, like you're saying, Quinn. Like that doesn't necessarily make sense, but like at least they were using up all the space effectively. Like this is just an eyesore.
Yeah. No, and also it's injury to insult when he looks at the photo and Irv has been photoshopped out, but they didn't even recrop it. They left all that blank space there as it's so sloppy. Like this goes. Yeah. You said something earlier about Milkshake's, I guess, sloppiness, so his kindness, right, and how this is like backfiring on him. It's interesting because I think this is. I don't know if it's like kind of a thing of, well, this is just kind of last minute, and we got to throw this together by tomorrow morning when these people come in. Otherwise, it's too late, and it's just sloppy because it's rushed, or if this is just Milkshake not being great at his job yet, stepping into the role of Cobell, or if this is just how Lumen does it. But the thing that stuck out to me is all the things he's doing for kindness are like they're double-edged swords, right? Because they on one hand give Innies hope, I think, which can be a dangerous thing in their situation. You almost don't want them to have any hope of ever getting out of here, so they'll sit down and do their jobs. But on the other end, you see this with Dylan, with his meeting with his wife. It's also giving Milchek some control. Like he's threatening to take this thing away now that Dylan values, right? Or to tell the others and spoil sort of his secret here. It is a weird double-edged sword, and I really like it. There's a couple power dynamics at play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, go ahead.
I was just like, I can't help but wondering if like the picture thing is just another form of like psychological torment. I don't know. It just almost seems so in your face. Like someone is messing with them like really, really hard, and they're doing like really weird psychological things to screw with their brains. Like maybe there's an even bigger purpose to all of this that we're not even seeing. Because why do they even have Miss Casey in the first place? Like it's so there's a lot that's up in the air.
Yeah, the picture in particular, like that's super interesting to me because you're both right. Like his absence in the picture is more alarming than just having the picture of your dead friend. You know what I mean? Like if the point is, well, we don't want him to see that and feel bad about that, and it's also him following through with his promise to like erase him from the existence or whatever. But like the thinking would be like, well, you don't want to see that guy because he's gone, and every time you see him, it'll make you sad. Well, if you take him out of the picture and you know he was there, then that's just like 10 times. That's like 10x like worse.
Yeah, it makes you angry too.
Yeah, but as far as like the kindness thing, I think Miss Wong, she made that she made the subtext text in this one whenever she said like you shouldn't let them have this funeral that we're going to talk about in a second because it makes them feel like people, and that would be the argument against, right? I do agree though that at least in the Dylan situation, like it was a smart move because he does have something to take away from him now, which he didn't. So he could get some leverage if he's smart about it.
But if you call his bluff, he can only play that card one time, right? So
yeah,
use it wisely, I guess.
True.
So yeah, the funeral. This was kind of like the last big thing from the trailers. I think that was still out there. Was this, this melon head? This one thing about this episode. I think that it made me feel even more secure. Like I think story-wise, you can't bring Irv back, but I feel like there's exceptions in that case. But like here, this felt like we're saying goodbye to the Innie character. Like it would really be hard to come up with a good reason to have him return to work at this point. But like I said, this was the last kind of big thing from the trailer. And I think it was kind of funny. It was funny to me anyways, that like, of course, this meant that Irv wasn't going to be working on the floor anymore at some point, right? Because we knew that watermelon is a direct thing to seeing Bert's, his retirement party the year before, and it was sort of like, as collectively, we were all just like, well, it might mean something different, right? And we don't want John Turturro to be not there anymore, you know what I mean? So it could be something different than that, but it turned out to be even a little bit worse because it's not a retirement party, it's a funeral, which one of the things about that really it wasn't initial, but something I kept thinking about as I was looking at those scenes. This is something that they have like already pre-printed mugs for, like in a back room ready to go, like just in case. And they're really for when someone dies on the floor. You know what I mean? So it's pretty dark when you think about it that way. Like these are potential, like, they know that there's the potential and they're prepared for the potential for the innies to die at any time. And
maybe
and
in
they
a
work.
battle.
That's what I'm saying. They work
truth to
work
the O&D?
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of funny.
It's interesting how like pre-packaged it all was. Well, didn't he say like a bereavement package or whatever?
Yeah,
but,
bereavement kit, I think is what he called it.
Bereavement kit, yeah. But I was gonna say that, I think obviously Irv isn't gonna be working there anymore. But I don't think that Irv, the entity, is necessarily gone, right? I still think that there's obviously the possibility of like that these characters are gonna eventually be integrated. Right. I think that's the only real option for both of the entities to live is reintegration. So I think that's a possibility in the future.
Yeah, that's something that's come up several times on the streams, especially, is that like, what else are you going to do? You make us love these characters. We get completely invested in them, and then you can't just sort of kill them all off. You know what I mean? Like that's just grim. So it's got to be reintegration. It seems like it's tougher in the case of Helena because of her family's feelings about innies in general,
It'd be interesting with Helena. I would wonder, let's say Helena becomes reintegrated. Does she even still, what does she want now? Like now that both entities, like maybe she still wants the same thing and she's still like, yeah, fuck these innies. I don't know. So we don't know.
That is the most interesting option. I agree. And you could almost see a situation where somehow they get Helly out and reintegrate her on that side. And then it's sort of like forced on Helena, who wouldn't want that. And that could be super compelling.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that there was, one of the things that people brought up after the last episode was that there was at least a decent amount of people who thought that it was showing that Irv had already been reintegrated. I wasn't a fan of the idea, and I feel like this is we don't see anything that would. Like, and when we see him in the outside world here, I don't see anything that would back that up.
I agree.
Yeah.
Other theories, I guess, people were pretty. There was a pretty strong. I don't know if it was just because it was kind of clickbaity too, but like a lot of people talking about this being a simulation. There was a lot of There was a popular.
I hate this theory. I hate this theory.
That's like, I just kind of don't want it to be like, I just kind of have a mental block against it in the first place. But like, I had my issues with not being able to tell if it was real or not watching the 4th episode, but I didn't get to the end and think, okay, well then it's probably a simulation. And I had to look for the clues that'll back that up instead of like, well, this probably really happened. There's a creative decision involved, I guess, to do it the way that they did it. But like, but yeah, it was pretty popular, but I think that this also I think that this also kind of closes the door on that. I mean, my thinking after I was kind of trying to sort it out was that they were trying to put us in the same place as the innies, have us be just as disoriented as Irv is when he wakes up in the middle of that lake. And, in interviews, they pretty much backed that up. That's what they were trying to do. Like we would figure it out. Like they don't know where they're at, so we're going to figure out things as they figure out things. And
the whole like it was a simulation thing has been like played out since like Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's such an old trope. Like we can't keep doing that.
and it's too much. Like Westworld is the perfect example of this, where it was just too much. They took kind of stuff that could logically be sort of extrapolated from their initial concept and just ran too far with it. And this would be like, you can't trust the memories because each character is severed into two people, and you've got a simulation layer on top. It would just get pointless to even talk about the show at that point, because it could be literally anything.
Yeah, you lose anything that grounds you to the actual narrative, like, because you don't even know what he's
because and then nothing feels like you can actually invest in it either. You know, you just sort of like, oh well, I'm not going to feel bad about that because next week it might not matter anyways. You know.
Yeah, just keep it narrow, keep it focused. Yeah, I like that.
You can do weird shit, but just like have some rules, you know, and follow them, and don't be dishonest. You know, like I guess that's really, you know, if you're watching really closely, that's the thing that I just want you to get there honestly. And if you do that, that's going to be satisfying all the way around, you know? The funeral itself was, I mean, I really liked the set design, the production design here with the old dot matrix printer and I don't know what they had the little screen there with like sort of the 8-bit animation of Irv. I don't know if you looked at it, but there's like a thing where you can put your hands there. They didn't really extrapolate on like what that was for or how that was. Like nobody actually walked up to it.
It almost feels like a remnant from when this was the break room, right? Where they'd force you to put your hands on these things.
I think that's a pretty good guess as to why it looks like that. Like it's just seriously a thing that they already had in the break room, because they did have that in whenever they did their sessions.
Yeah, it's like the wellness center wellness center. Is that what it's called?
Wellness is where, that's where Miss Casey used to work.
Yeah, where when they removed that, all they did was fill in those walls and didn't put trim on them, nothing. It's just like, oh, here's two spots where doors used to be, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I found I don't like watch trailers a lot of times when I'm going to watch a show, unless I'm going to be reviewing it for YouTube. So I didn't see the watermelon until I watched this episode, and that watermelon was so grotesque. It's absolutely disgusting. It looks like it's supposed to make you think of like blood or like a skinned face or something. So it was really odd looking. And also the paintings too. The paintings were mentioned. So like the skinned face, and they're kind of like the paintings where they're like replaced as Kier. So I mean, they're kind of like wearing Kier's skin. That's kind of a loose connection maybe, but I did think about that.
And you eat your friend, like he was eating his ear.
Yeah.
Like when he's having these sad moments, and you know, like his, you know, kind of in remembrance of his good friend that he'll never see again, he's like sitting there eating his ear made of melon. Like it just doesn't make any sense. It's great. It's a great visual gag, but like, wow.
We eat the dead.
Yeah. I did like, I mean, the eulogy was good. It's funny because, you know, you think, well, this is Dylan. He's a grown man. He's probably been through something like this again. And then you think, well, no, actually he's like 2 years old, and they have never, like, you know, Petey didn't come back. But other than that, like this is a first time experience, you know?
Yeah.
Having to say goodbye to a friend.
Yeah. That's the thing too, that the show, these characters, the Innies are really all kind of like innocent in their own ways, because they're actually really young. We might maybe talk about this later, but that's kind of the reason they were so like influenced by Ricken's novel in the first place, because that was the first thing of that type that they ever experienced. So
first
obviously,
philosophy book, right?
Yeah. So I think they're all like really earnest in this way, because they don't have like these kind of like social constraints that would have formed if they had lived on the outside.
Yeah, that's my favorite part about it. I think, like, as far as, you know, there's probably a good story that they're out to tell, as far as, you know, this situation with the, you know, the work-life balance and the corporation that's crazy powerful and all this stuff. But yeah, that's the magic of the show for me, is that these people are fully grown adults without any experience. You know, they're just experiencing everything for the first time, which is just, it just makes it so much fun to like just kind of imagine how they're going to react and see how they react to different things, you know.
And it also makes it more barbaric because these are such young entities. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely awful, like from the other end, that they're basically like lab rats, I guess, or, you know.
Makes you wonder where they're going, because I feel like in season 1 they were, I wouldn't say newborns, they're like toddlers, you know, just kind of learning and exploring and trying to figure things out. Here they feel very much like rebellious teenagers. Are we going to evolve past that at some point, or, you know, are we going to have fully integrated, self-actualized human beings by the end of this season or in season 3?
Yeah, you wonder if you got a chance to observe yourself in this situation, you know, like if you could have an innie that you could just say, okay, what would I be like if I didn't have all this experience, all this luggage, and then you had the chance to you know, bring that back on. It would be pretty surreal for sure. I guess the big thing that comes out of this funeral in the end of the day is that he discovers the note that Irv left for him. The hang in there was out there. Like last week when we were talking about that during the stream, people jumped on that pretty quickly and was like, yeah, I think it's going to be behind the poster. Because I mean, I thought of the poster right away because it's the background that we have here for the stream. But I didn't, that just seemed, I guess that was like kind of elaborate, him to hide it. And then how would he find it? And that all seemed to work itself out in a pretty satisfying way this week, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. What's his reaction to it, do you think? How does he feel about it?
My take was that he hides it because he doesn't want to lose his privileges of seeing Gretchen.
Mm-hmm.
I had quite a few people who disagreed with that. I saw in the comments that they thought I was wrong, that he somehow memorized it, but it's not like that's one of the things about the thing is you can't memorize that.
No, I think that's maybe why, you know, it's
that's
good
why
gag.
It's as stupid looking as it is. Yeah, because for sure, like your takeaway is like, okay, he saw that, but it's way too complicated to remember it exactly.
But at the same time, and I agree with you, I think he is like, I don't want this to come to light because I might lose my privileges. But also, he doesn't destroy it, which he could have easily done. He puts it back into the place where it stayed hidden for however long before it got to him. So
it's like, maybe I'll go back and check this out later. That's kind of what I got, the impression that I got from it.
Yeah, I think he was conflicted. I don't think he was like, oh, no way am I ever going to do this because I don't want to get in trouble. I think that it just shows where his priorities are, right? Like he still cares about his friends. You know, we saw that, like he, you know, and he's still a part of the team, but at the same time, he really likes these little sessions that he gets with Gretchen. So, he's compromised. I mean, the directions are hilarious though. Like whenever I watch it on the screeners, that it's not really that clear. So that one of the first things I did whenever I started editing was I looked at the actual thing. I was like, geez. I want, like, because in the initial episode, we don't see whether she tells him the directions or not, right? Mm-hmm. So I was thinking after the fact, I was like, maybe it was because it would have made the runtime of the episode so much longer that they couldn't go through that. It's like right, left, long hallway, right, left. So yeah, so that's I feel like we're closer to that. Like it is still behind the picture. I think he probably will tell them about it if it takes him a little while.
Yeah.
But I think that we're going to definitely see that develop, because I think by the end of the season that you're going to have to get down there, because at the end of this episode, we have Mark see her, and that's really wild too, when you think about it, because I was listening to the official podcast, and they were talking about that moment. Adam Scott and Ben Stiller were talking about it, and I was just thinking about that. When you lose someone who's close to you, that's one of the worst things. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but like if you have a dream where they're still alive, and then you wake up and like you have that moment where you're like, oh, that's not real, like that, then you have to sort of relive that loss again, just because you had this like good feeling about seeing this person that you hadn't seen, and then you have to be like, oh yeah, well actually they're not around anymore. That's sort of what he saw whenever he had that little reintegration moment at the end of the episode. And I think that he did a really good job of showing that, because Patty Mark kind of sucks,
Yeah.
He's kind of an annoying person in a lot of ways.
I agree, but I also think that he's someone that's going through like grief. So
no, I'm not saying that it's for no reason.
He's still
yeah, but like because you think about like his his dates with Alexa in the first season or something.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Where he's just like slugging back drinks like before dinner even arrives, and then he goes out and he's like sort of harassing the guy who, I mean, obviously the Whole Mind Collective is something that he wouldn't like as a person who is doing Severance, but at the same time, I mean, he's kind of a dick when it comes to that kind of stuff. And so I thought that was really effective, that final scene. And I think you brought this up. I think you complained about it quite a bit, Jim, but they're doing the thing where that someone's just about to say something and then they cut it off. He says your Audi is going to, and then
evolve. That's what I heard.
Oh,
I heard the word evolve, and I read it like 5 times, but I could have been totally wrong. But I heard evolve. Now maybe that's just me like hearing what I want to hear, but that's what I heard. I don't know if anybody can confirm or deny that, but that's what I heard.
I
turned on the
even
subtitles and it just says ... So
I'm gonna be honest and say that I just read the subtitles and didn't investigate any further. So
same here.
I wasn't even looking for it. Now you're gonna make me go back and look at it again.
You guys go, everybody in the chat too, go back and look at that. Tell me if you hear evolve or like what, or am I insane?
Between the ending of this where she's appearing to Mark, and the beginning of the episode where we see this new character, Doctor or whatever, are we going to go to the tested floor before the innies do? I think there's a possibility of that.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I tried really hard to avoid reviews and spoilers and stuff like that. I did pick up something, like I know something is coming.
Okay.
I don't know the details because I only heard it secondhand. But I'm not gonna speculate on the answer to your question. Like I'm not, and I guess the way that I said that, it makes it sound like I do know something, but I don't. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I have an idea that we're going to see something that we haven't seen yet. That might maybe put that into a better perspective. I don't know.
I guess in a way we've seen the testing floor because we saw that flash of Gemma up on Mark's computer, which I don't think he saw, but definitely like she had to be on the testing floor at that point. So
yeah, I think that's a fair assumption.
Yeah, I think we could totally see the testing floor before the innies. That's definitely a possibility.
I mean, the guy is
the Doctor.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and why do it that way? Like we have to. There's a reveal. They're saying we're gonna reveal something about this character and what he does and how he affects the bigger thing.
He's just the dentist. He's just the dentist.
Yeah.
For everybody.
The goat dentist. Yeah, worked on the goat's teeth.
Sometimes, whenever I think of one thing that I think is super important, that whenever whenever Devin says, let's Occam's razor this shit, like in the first episode, I feel like that is more than just a throwaway line. Like, I feel like she is giving pretty sound advice there for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a thing that's there for, like, that's the writers telling us, you know, this is probably a little bit simpler than what you think. You know what I mean? I don't know. You guys have either of you guys spent any time watching The Twilight Zone?
Oh, yeah.
Little.
I've watched a good bit of The Twilight Zone, but not like all of it. But yeah.
Yeah. Like this is something that I used to watch it's been a long time, but they used to be on like just regular TV. You know what I mean? Like they would just keep, showing reruns or whatever.
Like Sci-Fi Channel used to play them.
Yeah. So there's one in particular. It's called After Hours, and people are talking about that quite a bit because episode 8, I think it is, the title of that is After Hours. So people are talking about a connection between what happens in that episode and what might be going on. Have either of you seen it? Do you know that one by name?
I don't know by name. I mean, maybe if you describe the plot of it, I might know what it is, but not by name.
Yeah, it's a woman that she goes into a department store, and she goes into, like, it's a busy department store. She's looking for something, and she tries to go into the elevator, and the person in the elevator, there's a whole bunch of people waiting in line for this one elevator, and then there's another one off to the side, and it's empty, and the guy calls her in there, and then he takes her to a floor that doesn't even exist. Like, he takes her to the 9th floor, which the thing only goes up to 8 or whatever, and she has this really weird interaction up there, and it reveals something about her identity that she had forgotten, basically, is the gist of it. Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, it's typical, but it's pretty good. But it's making me think about this whole testing room floor. It's maybe in a way I hadn't thought about it before, because the biggest question is, how did Gemma get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people have said that they just picked up her body. That sort of seems like the indication, right? Because even in this episode where Gabi says, they have people that can make stuff like that happen. But the other part of that, and part of what people have theorized, is that she might have been involved with Lumen before she met Mark. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And therefore, if that's possible, then it's also possible that, that she's been involved with the testing floor and everything else, even before they had a relationship. You know what I mean? Which which could be a stretch. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that this is like, oh, okay, of course, this is obvious.
There's so many questions surrounding Mark and his wife. Because it's like, why was Miss Cobell so concerned with Mark in the first place? Like, why? There's so many questions. It seems like they're putting Mark in this room with his wife and having her do these sessions with him. This seems like obviously they're trying to get something out of this, right? But why? So it wouldn't put it past me if she was a part of the company. I wouldn't put it past them if she was.
Yeah, because it was just sort of like this. Watching this Twilight Zone episode kind of made me think about that in a different way, because the woman she has a reason to be there, but she doesn't know what it is until that's revealed to her. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she was sent out into the world, and she basically forgot herself, you know what I mean? And then when she comes back to this the store, she's reacquainted with, like, who she is and how that all played out. And it just made me think about, because there's a really big problem in the way that Mark is kind of in this triangle between him and Helly, and I guess by extension Helena and Gemma. You know what I mean? Like, his Innie and Outie, they have two very separate love interests. So when you reintegrate them, what happens, right?
Good question.
So yeah, so I've been trying to figure out how you get around that. You know what I mean? Like,
you don't get around it. I think he'll just be in love with two people.
Yeah, so that's I don't know. Like I guess if Gemma is not what he thought she was, you know, like if something is, then maybe there's a way where you know that would start to make sense. I wanted to thank the Bikini Truther for the super sticker. Thank you for the $1.99. That's much appreciated. And
so you're saying
go ahead. I was just going to say just thank rhetorical mode as well. $2. Thank you for that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so you're saying that maybe he learned something about Gemma that changes his opinion of her, and so like he can't really love her in the same way because it's kind of like, I don't really know who you are, which is what he said to Helly in this episode.
Yeah.
So that to me makes a lot of sense. So
yeah, because if you start to flip that, if you start to flip those things around, you know what I mean? Like just like you just did, you know, like what he said to Helly, that I don't really know you. It's possible that it's Gemma that he doesn't really know.
In his mind right now, she's kind of this idealized, angelic, ethereal almost figure. So it would be really interesting if they completely subvert that and she's actually, maybe she was a terrible person somehow. And he has to see that and confront that. It will be a really interesting character moment because this is the thing that like it's been this character's thing the entire show, that he lost his wife, and it's like this really thing, this thing that's been driving all of this. Like this is why he severed in the first place. So that makes to me so much sense that it's kind of like firing off in my brain because he's talking about how he knew that she was dead. Like if she was involved with it, it actually makes it all click into place.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about for a little bit too. Like I'm not sold 100%, you know what I mean? But it has made the thought experiment a little more interesting right now, you know, because
what if, okay, I'm the same way you are, Quinn. I'm like, oh my God, this is making too much sense. If we kind of pair like Gemma's thing with Helena's thing and how Helen is doing this stunt going in to, you know, prove that Lumen is awesome, right? And that Severance is a great procedure. I mean, as part of that, I mean, I wonder if there's a potential for Gemma to have faked her death. Like Gemma being like living in Kier and whatever, hooking up with Mark, and then she just goes off on this other mission, which is involving Mark. Like she goes down there, forgets who she is in order to be the wellness director or whatever, and they bring Mark in knowing that that's going to kind of drive him. That's a little too like dominoes kind of thing, but I could see like some connection to where it would be just deliciously horrific if the thing that he learns about her that makes him hate her is that she was like a Lumen acolyte who gave up her life with him in order to do this mission for them. Yeah. At the same time, he's like learning and integrating and learning how awful everything is down there.
Yeah. How much do we really know about Gemma and her history and her family? She could have a Lumen family. They could be like a Kier family. They could be fully a part of the cult for all we know. Which like you said, it's kind of like a convoluted whole thing, but it's a possibility. It's a distinct possibility.
And they keep talking about how important Mark is, right? And that really connects the thing to Gemma, and you know, connecting to Cold Harbor. I think Cold Harbor is somehow tied directly to Gemma, and this thing that he's working on, it's going to be important for the planet, is based on their like connection together.
Yeah, and the thing about her, like you said, what do we know about her? All we know about her is that no one has anything bad to say about her whatsoever. Like the UUR stuff that came out, you know, the Rick Rickens book, the part that they put out last week, that basically has a whole bunch of stuff about them, like going on a, you know, and like it's basically just, there's a huge part of it where it's just Rickon missing her because she was such a wonderful person, you know. Devin obviously feels the same way because she kind of knows that she made Mark a better person, you know, because he's been so difficult and had such a hard time since she's died, you know what I mean? So there's all this stuff that revolves around her being almost like this, you know, and it's like that with anyone that I guess that's gone, you know what I mean? You're always going to remember the things that you like best about them and whatever. But So I don't want to undermine the whole sense of like loss that they built up and how that is all very real for Mark, and how that's all a big part of his motivation, and how that could be a part of a motivation for anyone to get severed, and why that makes sense or whatever, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's almost hard to believe that she is that perfect, and then that they're going to rescue her from there. And then what is that going to mean for any Mark and Helly and everything else, you know what I mean? Because I like that romance too, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that if it all turns out to be fabricated, like her death and all that stuff, and she's involved, the fact that they did all of this, I think, speaks to the greater theme of like just dehumanization that's at play in this story. Because like, wow, they absolutely do not care about like just manipulating every aspect of someone and just using individuals and actual conscious people for their own goals.
Yeah.
So
because and that goes back to that answer that I put in the notes that from Stiller, like that, they, and the idea that they kept saying that in the season that they're not, or this episode, that they're not people, it's like you can do anything if you think about whatever you're experimenting on, or whatever you're trying to control, or whatever, if you don't think of them as the same as people, then you can do whatever you want. You can justify anything. You know what I mean?
I brought up Star Trek: The Next Generation, but there's a great episode of Star Trek called Measure of a Man. There's the character Data, who's an android. He gets put on trial to determine whether or not he's a conscious being. And that's the entire point of the episode. There's a character that says, like, they just want to create a race of disposable people, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from with that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's something to think about for next week, I guess. Like I said, I think there is something that will in the near future in the season sometime that'll shed a little bit more light. I guess as far as one thing I want to get into though for sure before we wrap up though would be the whole dynamic between Milch and Miss Wong. I've kind of been in the part, like my idea about her has been that she's kind of grown up in the cult, Miss Wong, and that's why she's there. You mentioned Scientology earlier. It kind of gives me some of that vibes, you know what I mean? Like people who grow up inside the organization kind of thing. This was an interesting episode for Miss Wong, like she dropped some stuff and throughout that just was like, oh man, she could be coming for Milchek's job, huh?
I couldn't tell if she was threatening him when she said, oh yeah, and you have an evaluation, right?
Yeah.
I was like, wait, does she have some kind of pull in this evaluation? I was like, that was wow.
And then it was so funny because then she snitched on him from using too many big words.
Yeah. I also feel I love the aspect of it that she's also just a child because she really wanted to do her theremin performance. She's like, I thought I was going to get to perform. Like, so that was really interesting. But I agree with you. I think that she's like just an indoctrinated child.
Yeah, because there was a lot of things about her being severed or being some other consciousness put into a child's body. She made a comment about being a crossing guard. So people thought maybe she was sort of in a Gemma situation, you know what I mean? Like where she got hit by a car at work doing her, crossing guard stuff. And they brought her in and fixed her up on the testing floor. I think she's probably just a kid who grew up, and it makes you wonder, you know what I mean? Because Cobell kind of had those vibes. I mean, she went to the Myrtle Egan School for Girls. That's where she was indoctrinated and all that. It makes you wonder about Seth a little, or it makes me wonder about Seth. Because I've never really been able to tell if he's like, obviously he's got to be a true believer to some level to be as close to Cold Harbor as he is. Like, as we find out that's more important. Coming out of this episode, I feel like because, people were saying, well, he makes so many mistakes. Why don't they just get rid of him? I don't think they really can. I feel like this is a sensitive project to the point of like, there's only so many people they'll trust. And finding out that this is probably true about her, that she probably came up through the cult, makes me really want to know more about how he came up, you know?
I think that when it comes to Milch, there's probably like degrees of true belief, right?
Yeah.
So maybe he doesn't maybe he doesn't fully believe, but maybe he's just like bought into the system. And right, you do see the cracks in Milch, even in this episode. I thought it was really interesting. What's her name? Natalie.
Mm-hmm.
When he's talking to Natalie and he's like, oh, so me and you have similar. He's trying to get something out of her, but she's not kind of there yet. So I don't know if he's like fully bought in, but he definitely believes in the ability of the system to produce something that benefits him. So that's why he agrees. He at the end he chooses to go harder on them. He obeys what the corporation is telling him ultimately.
Yeah. I thought that, you know, because in the first season, like, I think we're sort of set up to really kind of like him, even though he's on the wrong side of things, you know, like as compared to Cobell, he seems like the better option, like the one that might have some kind of, some kind of like seeing the innies as real people and like not doing horrible things to them kind of thing.
And he's a lot more fun at parties too.
Yeah, you know, and you kind of think, well, he's probably all right. He's probably just worried about his career, you know, like he's in that system, you know what I mean? So he has to perform to make a paycheck to live, you know, just like anybody else who has a corporate job, right? I think now, though, I think that because of his proximity to Cold Harbor, and just like watching Mr. Drummond say that in this episode, like saying like this is going to be the biggest thing that happened on this planet or whatever, that
was eerie.
And this is going to be, you know, you're being there, like overseeing it is going to be a huge accomplishment, you know, like that tells me that there's only so many people that they'll let that be in that position, you know what I mean? And so even though Seth made some big mistakes and things backfired and everything else, like they kind of have to stick with him at this point. They can't, because their other choice is a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And whoever they choose for these non-severed jobs on the severed floor has to be, in their mind, fully indoctrinated. They can't be someone, they have to have years of indoctrination and have been tested and
like their loyalty has to be
sensitive.
Without question, right?
Yeah. So you can't really just fire the next 3 people in line and bring in some untested people. They need to kind of work their way through that system.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So, and Natalie she's super interesting because she is the worst, like as far like on some level, right? Like, because she's the voice of you know, like especially you know, Cobell was no she was no angel in season 1, but like if you looked at her compared to Natalie, it was just like, oh, okay, that Natalie's worse, you know.
Yeah.
Whenever they would have showdowns or whatever. But yeah, it is super interesting to see Seth reach out to her, and her like one being kind of restricted by like what her job is, and like the fact that she is being watched as much as anyone else. Like, you know, this time whenever she, you know, he reaches out to her, like I didn't think she gave away as much with her face as much this time as the last time. But she didn't like stop him. She didn't like, she could have told on him, you know what I mean? Like, because that was one of the things that was in his performance review that was on his side, was that he did well on, you know, he received those paintings with grace, even though that's sort of, I don't know if that's the way I would describe it, you know, necessarily.
Yeah.
Like he didn't do anything. He didn't complain outwardly, you know what I mean? But here he brings it up, and she doesn't really, you know, she kind of, by not doing anything, she kind of acknowledges him, right?
Mm-hmm. But it's possible too that she's also just like, just say whatever you're gonna say to me so I can record this and like tell it to like the higher ups later on. So I don't know. It could go either way.
Yeah, she's got real media training, you know what I mean? Like she's the kind of person that if she wanted to, she could tell you something that, you know, was a complete lie and make it look like she was doing you a favor for sure.
But I mean, so in regards to like these paintings, I gotta say this makes it feel like this kind of like sloppiness goes all the way up the ladder at Lumen, because like anybody with a thought in their head is going to say maybe these pictures are going to cause conflicted feelings. Maybe we could do something else in order to provoke the reaction we want. So it doesn't stop at like, oh, Milchek's improvising, Cobell's improvising and trying to change things. It feels like Lumen's idea of what motivates people is either very naive or it's just sloppy. It's just sloppy.
Yeah, I think what they're going for there is just tone deaf, and I mean, I think like they were trying to, you know, kind of do a satire of like actual corporate culture, right? You know what I mean? Like
Juneteenth ice cream.
Yeah. You know, so like I think there's a joke there. I mean, I think there's something that they could go for, but I would agree with what you're saying too, though, because I mean, while there's like paranoia and loyalty oaths and all this other shit is like pretty standard for cults, like being really as good as you imagine that you are and things working the way that they're designed isn't really, you know, those two things don't go hand in hand necessarily, you know, like they're going to take someone who's loyal and that will toe the line over someone who is competent. And so of course that's going to show across the big organization, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
And they did it twice. That's just like not only sloppy but lazy too.
And then I mean, then there's also the possibility that this is all being like put together by an 18th or 19th century brain in a jar somewhere.
Oh, right.
You know,
the Egan hive mind theory.
Yeah. This is coming from like you were were saying earlier. If you're really sold on the thing, then you kind of can't change it, right? You can't, if the canon is from that period of time and from that guy's mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason, you know, like that's you just can't change any of that stuff. You just have to try to make it work in the modern day somehow. You know what I mean?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the big problems I think that you have with that. I mean, it goes through that goes for large, real actual religions as well. You know, as the inflexibility of things.
Yeah. There's a reason why Catholicism is not like the most popular thing on the planet anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, the tightening the leash thing, I mean, I think that's really going to come down, huh? I think we're going to see a different side of Milchek for the rest of the season.
Seems like it, judging by that elevator scene. There's a lot of malice. I think there's a lot of malice. Like see, that's the thing about this duality. I think that sometimes he's like, I'm gonna be nice. But then also he has this side of him that's like, I think, really dark and vindictive and kind of resentful. So we're seeing that come out. And I do think this is like the form that Milchek is going to take for the rest of the season, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys, what was your take on like, where was he at when he goes in there? Because it's a weird thing that he does there, right? Like, he totally invades Mark's space, like in a way that we've never seen him do something like that before. He curses, you know what I mean? Like he says fuck instead of like you slept with the person. And I don't know. I just wonder how you guys interpret that, because of course he's being aggressive, but at the same time he's being very not Seth Milchek in that moment, right? So like, what is the change show? What is it showing? Is it showing that he has a dark side, or is it showing that he's kind of afraid? And this is sort of like, you know, this is kind of like, well, this is, you know, he's really kind of worried about his position and he's going to go to any length to keep it.
I think that's part of it, that he's going to go through any lengths to keep his position. But I feel like it's also like it's an assertion of dominance. Like he's using the word fuck because it has more emotional resonance. Like he wants to emphasize it. He wants to show Mark that I am the boss and you will listen to me. And all of these like little sassy things that you're doing are need to stop because I'm the one that's in control here. And that's the way that I mostly interpreted the scene.
So you're not seeing like insecurity or desperation or anything like that?
Well, to some degree, but I do see that. I do see that as the driving reason, but I think this is his way of securing his position. And so that's like the reason that he's doing what he's doing.
Because I mean, you could give him a lot of, you could point out a lot of mistakes that have happened there, but like, I feel like I still see him as a competent person. Like he does a ton of shit all the time. Like if we're like to just take it all at face value, like if you need something done, you could go to Seth Milchek and he'll get it done for you, in 48 hours, what I'm saying? Like
gone wrong is not his fault. I mean, Helena did a bad job of acting like Helly, but it's honestly not her fault either. How could she? But like, Milchek didn't screw that up. Helena did.
I feel like that's kind of the thing with the company is that they want you to feel maybe like less needed than you actually are. They want you to feel like less useful than you actually are. So like he wants the job even more and he wants to work even harder to keep his position. So they're like pointing out all these bad things that you did. So like, hey, do better and be more effective for us. So
you can see that with
probably no one else would do a better job. So
the performance review was fun. Like it was fun on so many levels. Like and I don't know. Like I said, I really like Milchek as a character. I tend to put him on the opposing side, like mentally, like when I think about him, like he's not like a bad guy, not like that simply, but like, he's just on the wrong side of things. And like, I'm rooting for them. And that's what I thought was kind of wild about both is like, I'm definitely rooting against the Egans too. But like both of these people, when they were put in front of the cult, or the corporation respectively, and from their different positions, I kind of felt for both of them in a way that was a little bit surprising,
Yeah, I think it's so they're all doing things that they should know and that I judge as being immoral. But at the same time, I feel like they all have enough heart or something is there where any of them could flip. I could see Helena flipping. I could see Milchek flipping. I could see Cobell now that she's on the outs with them flipping. They never seem like they're lost causes. They always seem like they've been led astray by years of indoctrination and poor thinking.
I agree.
Yeah,
I 100% agree.
So just a couple of other things, I guess, and it really kind of hit me whenever I realized that whenever Devin and Rickon were talking, that she was reading the part that replaces the part that was from the big moment in episode 8 last season about the clock on the wall.
My favorite scene in the whole episode. I loved it.
Yeah.
I love this scene because it's just like, wow, you're such a. I don't even think sellout is even the right word because I feel like to sell out that implies that like you weren't already a sellout.
Yeah, I think it's
the idea about Rickon's book is that it's just a bunch of like derivative garbage. It's just like this really awful
hot air,
that nobody needs. It's all been said before, but because they've never like heard it before, that they think it's super awesome. But I feel like I loved how she said, "Oh, these aren't your words." I feel like the original thing wasn't his words either, right?
Yeah,
I feel like he's just a hack. I think he's just a hack, and he's always been a hack. And I think that she needs to realize that he's a hack.
Yeah,
come on, doesn't she? Man, I cannot explain why they're together, but
yeah, I've been wondering.
Yeah, he talked about that. Michael Chernus talked a little bit about that on this week's official podcast. He tried to make it make sense, and you could kind of hear the actor kind of having the same issue. Like he's like, well, opposites attract, and I think they got a good thing going. It might not make so much sense, but there's a lot of things that don't make sense about a relationship if you're not in them. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of stuff is, or maybe we just caught them at a bad time, or whatever.
Yeah,
but I do
Gemma
agree
could
that
be the glue, right? Like losing Gemma might have fractured this group in a weird way that, who knows?
I do agree though that there's a sense that he's a sellout, but it's really more of a reveal that that stuff wasn't that deep in the first place, and that
it was always his original character. He's someone that just wants to be like praised and worshipped.
Yeah,
that is the most accurate assessment of him. Yes.
And man, that's easy whenever you're just like the biggest corporate. That's like if Apple came to you and they said, okay, like we're your only customer. You know what I mean? Like whatever you got, give it to us. We'll buy as many as it takes to keep you, in a good position. We're going to send this to these people who are basically kids. Like they're just open books. Well, you can just imprint whatever you want on them.
Values out the window, principles down the toilet. I don't immediately doesn't care. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see where Devin fits in after this, because Mark's going behind her back. That's a definite thing that you notice in this episode is that he's not like, hey, you know what? I'm not doing the thing with my eyeballs anymore. I've actually already started reintegrating my brain with my innie, So she's been so like in her marriage, like her husband is going over to Lumen. Mark's kind of keeping her in the dark about what's going on. So I feel like that sets her up to do something big sometime soon.
Yeah, maybe it could be connected to the senator and his wife. There's prior relationship there, loose one, but maybe they come back to that.
I think.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I think they have to come back to that in some capacity, because I think that's important, that the fact that Lumen is severing people for reasons other than what the official reasons would be. So
yeah. In the comments, Jennifer Palumbo says here, Mark isn't protecting Devin ? So it's like, yeah, what he's doing is kind of protecting her, but I guess I'm just thinking from the character's perspective, she's going to feel left out of that. You know what I mean? Because she feels invested in finding out what the innie was doing too, and he's kind of cutting her out. It's probably for her own good though, like the commenter saying there, because you don't really want, like Lumen already seems to be kind of aggressive towards her. Like Drummond, he called her the more uppity of the two, right? Like so he brought her name up and put her on the radar.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the other thing that we haven't really gotten into too much yet would be Addie Irv.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like this phone conversation he's having, I feel like Ragabi or someone related to Ragabi is the only person that really makes sense as far as what we know about the story so far. I don't see anything. I mean, she's not picking up her phone when she's in Mark's basement, so that would still work. You know what I mean? Like the person he's trying to call is not answering. She's in Mark's basement, not in communication with anyone. So it doesn't rule it out. Does that feel more possible or less possible after this episode?
I've definitely been getting the impression that it was somehow associated with Dr. Ragabi, because I think who else could it be? But there's also definitely a possibility that this is another entity that we haven't seen yet that they're waiting to reveal. So I think that it could be also true.
Yeah, I guess the main thing is that we don't really see. I don't think what we see with him as far as that's concerned really changes anything. The big change is, of course, that he actually confronts Bert this time, and it's kind of funny because this was my thing. This was under the Devin Occam's razor thing. Was the simplest thing is that he banged on Bert's door. Bert wants to find out who he is, so he followed him around a little bit. That's what Bert says, but then you put Christopher Walken in the role and have him sitting inside the car, and now I'm not so sure if I believe him anymore. You know?
Mm-hmm. Have him make jokes about, I know where you live. You know?
Yeah. like it seems like, I mean, obviously we're going to find out. There's a ham, a bottle of expensive red wine. They're going to have a conversation, but yeah, I thought that was kind of funny, because I was like, I thought it was ahead of the game a little bit, like, because people were saying, oh, well, Bert is unsevered, or Bert is, he's Lumen, he's working with Lumen, not really with the innies or whatever. All of that was just sort of like, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I just think it's funny because they're like old men. They got the brains of kids and they fall in love for the first time. And it was super fun to watch. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't really that conspiratorial about it. You know what I mean? And then now, like whenever I'm actually confronted with the idea that, okay, that's probably what's happening. Like I'm not really trusting it as much as I was before this episode.
I was just thinking too on who Irv could have been talking to. They do mention in season 1 that other group that's kind of like on to Lumen, but they say they're kind of insignificant. I wouldn't dismiss the idea that there could be another group of people that are also investigating Lumen and are on to Lumen that Irving is in communication with. So I also think that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah, I think that I think it makes sense that he might be dealing with Ragabi. I don't think that he's reintegrated on any level. I think that he's a typical any outie situation.
I agree.
And
what do you think?
I think now
sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think now the question I have is there really something suspicious about Bert?
Yeah. I hope not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's
for Walken.
Yeah, it's sort of like you can give him anything to do and I'll watch it. So I mean, I'm not really too worried that it's not going to be good.
What about the possibility that he's talking to June, which is Petey's daughter?
Oh, yeah. I haven't even thought about that since season 1. Yeah, possible.
She's in a band that has a song called "Fuck Lumen."
Yeah.
So.
And something really weird happened to our dad related to what happened, him being severed at Lumen. So yeah, that makes sense. She might have some information or something that could be useful.
She is a character that could come back. I mean, they introduced her. She had a purpose in the story at the time, but it wasn't that well defined. You know what I mean? Like there could definitely be more. That could be there to set something up down the road. I liked her enough, you know what I mean? For as little as she had to do, she seemed fine. I wouldn't mind seeing her come back.
I loved when Marquez was like, "Oh, I love your band," and she's like, "Oh yeah, because I'm pretty sure we suck."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked the song was catchy enough that, whenever Bob Balaban said "fuck you, Lumen" this season, that it almost sounded like he was singing the song.
Yep.
Well, that is going to get us to the end of the notes that we have here. I guess if in the comments down there, if you have some questions, now would be a good time to fire them off. I'll give you guys both a chance to, if you have something else you want to bring up. Jim, you want to go first? Anything you want to touch on that we didn't get to in the normal conversation?
Not a lot. Boy, we talked about a lot of stuff. I'm kind of curious what you guys think is going to be the general pace of the rest of this season. I know, Pete, you had mentioned the full integration of Mark kind of feels like it should be at the end of this season, but maybe in relation to like Cold Harbor and the reveal of what exactly that is that something that's going to also coincide with the end of the season, or are we going to get there quicker than that?
Well, like I said, if we're 85%, he went from 81 to 85% in an episode where they didn't work all day long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Cold Harbor is going to be finished. Now, does that mean that when it's done that they're going to reveal exactly what that means for everybody involved? I don't know. That feels more cliffhanger bait than season finale stuff?
I think maybe by the end of the season, we might get some idea as to maybe what the spooky numbers actually represent. I feel like they've been holding out on it for so long that it kind of is time to be like, okay, this is what this is. But like, that doesn't like solve every mystery. That's just like one part of like a way bigger thing. So that would be cool to like see exactly what is going on with that. Because I remember in the first season, they were like, these numbers are scary. Like they're literally scary. So that implies that like somehow subconsciously they know what it means, but they're not able to access this knowledge when they're when they're severed. So maybe the integration process will allow Marquez to actually comprehend what he's doing. So that's also a possibility as well. So I'm just I think this season will give us some good reveals. I do.
Yeah, I think as far as generally speaking, I would say that we will get to the end of the file. The file will be refined, right? I think that we'll see something on the testing floor, like more than what we've seen so far. Like we'll have a better idea of what's going on there. I think that we'll see Mark at least, if not fully integrated, then some kind of major event will come out of his reintegration. You know, like I don't think we're just going to spin our wheels on like him just hanging out with Rogabi in the basement and seeing a flash here or there. Like something has to happen, I would guess. Beyond that, I really don't know. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be a tie-in with Cobell. Like we got to have some kind of a thing going on with her. So yeah, there's a lot.
I can't see it on that. On Cobell.
We were talking about this the last 2 weeks with different guests, you know, and it's really hard to see where this goes, you know, like, which is good. I like that, you know, like I like feeling like I'm in the dark about it. You know, we have a general idea of like where we're going towards, but like, it's really because they say that this could be 3 or 6 seasons, but at the same time, like when they finish this file, when he sees his wife, when he sees Gemma face to face and they know what's going on, like what happens after that? You know what I mean? Like, where's the other 3 seasons that they imagine are packed up in that story? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe
I like not knowing.
Maybe the reveal that they have is so devastating and it will change so much stuff and it'll just all like make so much perfect sense that it'll totally fuel more seasons. I don't know. Maybe they really believe in themselves.
Yeah. I'm having trouble with this color. What does it say? It says they cut off his ear like Van Gogh and his Audi is a painter. Ah, yeah, that is a cool detail.
That's neat, yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
I'm having trouble with it. I don't know what it is about this color in my monitor. But
it's appearing like normal on the StreamYard.
All right, so what is the poster's name? Silver Scale?
Silver Scale.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for that. That's a pretty cool detail that I didn't pick up on myself. And we had another one. I just wanted to thank MJ323. They said we didn't have to post it up there, but I did want to say thanks for the super chat from before. What do we got here? I saw people saying things. How does Irv know, or how does Rogabi know about the OTC? That's a good question. Anybody have an answer on that?
I don't know. Wait, what's OTC again? What can
that overtime contingency? Like she brings it up that she knows before she reveals that she knows that Gemma's alive on the floor, that she knows what happened with their Audis waking up, or the Innies waking up outside, basically.
Maybe she has some kind of connection in the company. See, I wouldn't put. I think that she's connected to Lumen, and she might have like.
Yeah, I mean, she used to work there, so.
Yeah. So maybe she has some way of acquiring knowledge. I get the sense that whatever she's doing, this is a much bigger thing than just her doing whatever she's doing. So I think that somehow she's gathering intelligence. I don't know.
Yeah. That the two options I thought with that were that she's working with Irv, so she knows from him, or she's connected to
yeah.
whoever's working with him, or it's also public, you know what I mean? Like that, something about that got out into the public about, we didn't really see much about that. We got the bullshit story that they were heroes out there, but what Helly art did was disseminated. We saw Helena making her
apology
mea
video.
culpa, her apology video. Yeah. So did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on, Quinn, from this season or this episode, or?
Not really. We did talk about a lot. Just that I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking really forward to seeing like where it goes, and I'm hoping that we get some significant reveals this season. I think we will. I think we'll get like that hook for like, no, you have to watch season 3. So I'm pretty excited. We've been waiting for how long for this season? It's been like
3 years.
3 years.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just happy to watch this every week, and I'm like just trusting that they're going to lead us in a good direction, because I think that the first season works so well, and it's so clear that they have really good ideas, and they have they have something to say, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the big picture is. So that's all.
Yeah. So I guess we can wrap this up. This is we're getting to about 2 hours, so that's a pretty good amount of time. I wanted to thank you for coming on. We had, I guess we can tell the people now, like I had my power go out like right before, whenever I was setting up for this. So I wasn't even sure. And we ended up getting it on whenever we had originally planned, but that kind of, usually we'll usually spend like 30 minutes and just, I'll talk to the guests and stuff beforehand. And we kind of had to do that without. So I just wanted to say, on here before you go, thanks for coming on, Quinn. Hopefully you'll come back again, because we're going to be, we've been doing this weekly. Jim and Aaron, his co-host on their podcast, they take turns. So I'm hoping to bring more, have extra people coming in.
I will also say that Aaron was pretty pissed that he wasn't on this week, because he's a big fan of yours, Quinn. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. He said, I think he said that in the stream last week. He was like, "Oh, he's coming on. I wish I would have known that. I would have traded with Jim." So
I offered, but he had plans. So
yeah. And I just wanted to say, I told you when I first, I've known your stuff for a long time, and like when it comes to YouTube, like, because it's work, like I really don't watch a lot of YouTube for fun. You know what I mean? Like it feels like work to me. Like I always knew your stuff was like solid and was, whenever people talked about it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure that's super good. You know what I mean? Because we have a lot of stuff in common that we like. But this week I watched a few hours of your 3 body stuff. Because honestly, because I really loved that series whenever I first discovered it a few years ago. And I thought about watching your stuff before, but I thought I might myself make things about it. You know what I mean? So like, I didn't want to be like too influenced by what you were doing or whatever. But like at this point, it was just like, well, there's no reason that I have to not watch that stuff. So like I watched a few hours and it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. And, I would have already have, just because I have a couple of friends who got turned on to the series, and like they're like, well, I don't really like the books that much. Like when I sat down to watch them, like I didn't really like the prose or this or that, but they're like, but I really like hearing Quinn talk about it. Like I like the big ideas, but I like those videos, but it's kind of funny because like I like stuff like that. I don't even really get, because like I said, I don't watch a lot of videos. Like people will say in mine, like I don't watch the show, but I love watching your videos about it. Like to me that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but hey, whatever floats your boat, I guess. Like I'm not going to tell you to not do it. I
discovered
you, so I got to go check out your foundation stuff.
Thanks. I need to do more foundation stuff. Oh really? Awesome.
Yeah, I'm wondering, that should be coming back soon too. Like they finished filming that a long time ago now.
They're doing a new season of the Apple Foundation show. Unfortunately, I only watched the first season of the Apple. Foundation show.
Yeah, we both covered that respectively. Like they do the thing, and we both had David Goyer on, like, and interviewed him, separately. So I'll be interested to see how that goes the next season. But they haven't really been talking about it yet. It's like it's been done, but it's not. I know there was some shakeup in the whether. I don't know if Goyer is still officially the showrunner or how that's going right now. Like, it's a little bit of a gray area. But yeah, so obviously I'd like to have you come back if you want sometime. We can talk about that.
For sure.
Definitely, I'd like maybe for Foundation and other stuff too, like I'll definitely shoot you a message if we're going to be streaming. And Jim, it's I guess we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. Like, I think the screeners only went up to 6. I didn't watch ahead. Like I actually disciplined myself because I didn't want to have that problem. But like, I'm assuming that they're going to send the rest after, but
I hope so.
If they don't, if they only do 6, then we might have to rethink the time on this, because I'm not sure that I can get my video done and be around at this time on it.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure
whatever works.
Yeah, but
I'm pretty flexible.
Thanks for coming out again. And you guys got anything? You said Yellow Jackets. Anything else on the horizon? I was just thinking, because you guys are both are next generation freaks, I think. So, aren't you guys doing like a full on ball move? Aren't you guys doing a full Star Trek rewatch of everything?
Yeah, we just started like 8 weeks ago, so we're on episode 8 of the original series, first season. It's gonna take a long time to get to next gen, but we'll get there.
Yeah, but you guys are. That's
Quinn,
the point. That's the point, though, right? Is you're going to go through the whole next generation too, right?
And DS9 and Voyager. And,
I love DS9 so much.
Oh, it's the greatest, man. Yeah, I was gonna say, if you want to come on any of those shows, feel free, because we're always looking for guests on those.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was just thinking when we were wrapping up, I was like, oh well, I know that you just. I've seen you mention. I've seen you both talk about Next Generation before, but it's not something that I watched in my formative years, so I somehow missed out on it. But I was thinking, yeah, there might be a team up there between you, because
yeah, I mean, I heard Quinn name check Measure of Man, and I was like, all right, he's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, TNG, like, that's my soft spot. Like, it's my favorite. Like, I really love TNG.
Me too.
Yeah, which I totally get it. You know what I mean? Because I have one of those for like Law and Order, which is not like great television, but like I just watched it at the right time when I was younger. You know what I mean? And so those originals, that original series, like I know the formula, I know how it's going to end every single time, but I just enjoyed the shit out of watching it. So like, I can't really change it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if I would have had that with the Next Generation, I'd feel the same way at this point, but I just didn't.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So thanks for coming on. I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks to everyone who came out and joined in with the conversation. We'll be back next week and doing it again. Hopefully you'll be able to join us. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.